My grandfather built things to last. That was his philosophy in everything. The ranch, the fences, the relationships he kept with his neighbors, and especially the old steel bridge that crossed the river at the heart of the property he left to me. That bridge had been standing long before I was born, connecting our land to the county road with a kind of quiet reliability that only becomes visible when it's threatened. It wasn't a landmark by anyone else's definition, but to our family it was infrastructure, history, and inheritance wrapped into a single aging steel frame. I maintained it every year without exception because I understood what it represented. Engineers had been clear with me for years. The bridge was built for local ranch traffic, for pickups and tractors, and the occasional piece of farm equipment. It was not built for industrial construction loads, and pushing it beyond its design limits was not a question of aesthetics. It was a question of structural integrity. For decades, that distinction never mattered to anyone but us. The surrounding countryside was quiet, agricultural, and sparsely traveled. Then the developers arrived. A few miles away, farmland that had been in families for generations was sold off and rezoned almost overnight. Hundreds of luxury homes were planned, permitted, and broken ground upon with a kind of speed that suggests someone had been planning this long before the public ever heard about it. Construction crews flooded the area. Machinery replaced pasture. The noise became constant. And at the center of this new industrial operation sat a homeowners association led by a woman whose approach to rules appeared to be that they were guidelines for other people. Inconveniences to be navigated around rather than boundaries to be respected. Someone inside that organization looked at a map and decided my bridge was a useful shortcut. No one called me. No one submitted a request or proposed a temporary easement or asked a single question about weight capacity. The trucks simply started coming. At first, it was a few supply vehicles crossing during daylight hours. Unusual, but not yet alarming. I told myself it might be a one-time thing. Within a week, the frequency had multiplied. Then the cement trucks arrived, and everything changed. I pulled up my security camera footage one afternoon and watched for a long time without saying anything. Vehicle after vehicle crossed that bridge from before sunrise until well into the evening. Many of them carrying loads that were obviously visibly beyond anything those steel supports were designed to bear. I could hear the metal groaning from hundreds of feet away when the heaviest trucks passed. That sound, that deep, reluctant complaint from aging steel under impossible stress, told me everything the footage confirmed. I contacted the HOA immediately and explained the situation with every courtesy I could summon. I cited the weight restrictions. I referenced the engineering history. I asked them to stop. The HOA president told me the bridge looked fine to her, that I was overreacting, and that construction would continue on its current timeline. She had not reviewed an engineering report. She had looked at the bridge and decided her visual assessment was sufficient. I decided at that point that the path forward required documentation, not debate. I retained an independent structural engineer who spent several days conducting a thorough inspection of the steel framework, the support structures, the load-bearing components, and the cumulative stress indicators that only a trained professional would know to look for. His report was detailed, technically precise, and deeply concerning. The bridge had already absorbed measurable structural stress. It was not an immediate danger of catastrophic failure, but continued exposure to overweight commercial traffic would shorten its functional lifespan significantly and increase the risk of serious damage with every passing week. I delivered that report to both the HOA and the construction company with a formal written request to cease use of the bridge. Both parties ignored it. The cement trucks came back the next morning. Every email I sent was saved. Every truck crossing was logged with timestamps from the security system. Every warning, every response, every instance of willful noncompliance was organized into a documentation file that grew more damning by the day. When I brought everything to county officials, the inspection report, the security footage, the correspondence trail, they ignored formal notices. They did not dismiss it. Multiple departments reviewed the materials, and county inspectors arrived at the property to conduct their own independent evaluation. Their findings aligned closely with my engineer's conclusions. Formal notices were issued to the HOA and the contractors. The language was precise and unambiguous. The warnings were official. No one could credibly claim ignorance. The trucks came back anyway. Whatever calculation was being made inside that development's management structure had apparently determined that the cost of rerouting deliveries exceeded the risk of ignoring county-issued warnings about someone else's private infrastructure. That calculation was about to be corrected at considerable expense. County officials authorized immediate protective measures. The following morning, workers arrived at my property and installed physical barriers at the bridge entrance. Monitoring equipment was positioned to track activity. Signage was posted that left no interpretive room. The bridge was officially and legally closed to construction traffic, and the authority behind that closure was not mine alone. It was the county's. When the first convoy of cement trucks rolled up and found the barriers, the drivers climbed out and stood in the road, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. Nobody had warned them this was coming, which said something important about the kind of internal communication the HOA president had been maintaining with her contractors. The fallout was immediate and expensive. Every delivery that had been routing through my property now had to travel a significantly longer alternate route. What had taken minutes began taking the better part of an hour. Fuel costs climbed. Delivery windows collapsed. Equipment sat idle on job sites waiting for materials that were stuck in transit. Schedules had already been filed with investors, and buyers began unraveling. The HOA president arrived at the barriers at some point during that first day and spent hours arguing with officials who had no authority to reverse decisions made above their pay grade. The barriers did not move. Inside the development's management structure, difficult conversations began happening behind closed doors. Legal teams pulled every document in the file and found exactly what I preserved: a months-long record of clear warnings, professional engineering reports, official county notices, and documented noncompliance at every stage. The paper trail did not support the narrative that this outcome had been unforeseeable. It supported the opposite conclusion entirely. Investors began asking questions. Contractors revised cost projections upward. Board members who had signed off on the shortcut strategy found themselves in rooms where accountability was no longer avoidable. Local press picked up the story. Residents of the new development learned details they had never been told, and the bridge dispute became something of a regional case study in what happens when convenience is prioritized over compliance and private property rights are treated as obstacles rather than legal realities. Throughout all of it, I never approached the situation as a conflict I wanted to win. My goal from the first phone call to the last county inspection was singular and unchanged: protect the bridge my grandfather built, preserve the property my family had held for generations, and ensure that the structure would still be standing when I was ready to pass it on. That goal did not require anger or escalation. It required documentation, patience, and the willingness to follow every legal procedure available until the system produced the outcome the evidence demanded. Follow-up inspections confirmed that the early intervention had made a meaningful difference. Major structural damage had been avoided. The bridge was stabilized, placed under a formal long-term maintenance and inspection schedule, and protected going forward by barriers that communicated status to anyone who approaches. Construction on the development eventually resumed through approved routes, slower and more expensive than the shortcut had been, but compliant. Several contractors updated their internal policies based on what had happened here. County officials cited the case in subsequent infrastructure discussions as an example of why engineering recommendations are not suggestions. The river still runs beneath that bridge every morning, quiet and indifferent to everything that happened above it. The steel still stands, maintained and protected, exactly as my grandfather intended when he built it. Some things are worth defending with patience, paperwork, and an absolute refusal to be dismissed. This was one of them, and the bridge is still standing to prove it.